All right, so welcome to Team Time. For those of you who haven't joined me before, Team Time is our opportunity to talk to the experts about some of the things that affect eating disorders. You know, I've spent 20 years studying eating disorders, trying to figure myself out, trying to figure out how these different things in my life play into it, anxiety, depression, those sorts of things. But, even after 20 years of researching this, there's no way that one person can be an expert on everything. So Team Time is going to be our way to bring in the experts. They tell us what they know about how it relates to eating disorders, tips for us to overcome different things. And so today we're going to talk about ADHD. And, I know that especially when I had my eating disorder, I was a hot mess. I mean, I was all over the place. My brain ran 1,000 miles an hour. My friends would always say, you're completely random. But it was because I was 20 steps ahead of where the conversation you currently was. I was one of those people that I always wanted to dabble in different things. I always wanted new things to kind of get me excited, but I wasn't super good at finishing a lot of things. And it really took a lot of focus for me to finish things. Because basically what would happen, I would be excited, and then, something else exciting would distract me. And next thing you know, I'm doing something else. So what I found was that I was constantly juggling these balls, and I was just all stressed out, and I was anxious, and I was having panic attacks. I couldn't sleep. And I was using the food, because that's what I had always used when I had a problem, to kind of soothe myself. And so if any of this sounds familiar to you, you'll want to stick around for today's talk, because we're really going to dive into some of these issues. So today, and just so you know, this is not uncommon. People with ADHD actually have a significantly higher risk of eating disorders. And so today's expert is going to tell us why that is. So I brought in my good friend, Terry Hagan. Terry Hagan, he is classic ADHD, which actually he used to his advantage. He started out as a neurosurgeon, and then he got excited about the brain. He became a psychiatrist, and now he owns a highly successful practice in Louisville, Kentucky, my birthplace. And he focuses on holistic health. And what I love about Terry is that he doesn't see things like ADHD as a disadvantage. He doesn't see it as something wrong with you. For him, he was able to create a holistic health practice because his interest went beyond neurosurgeon. It went beyond psychiatry. And so that's why I brought him in, because I thought he was the perfect person to talk to us about how we can use our own ADHD to our advantage, and how we can actually become more successful and happier in life by using some of the strengths that ADHD actually brings to our life. So hi, Terry.
Hi, Cam.
So how are you today?
Oh, I'm very good, particularly after that glowing introduction. I mean, you make me sound so much better than I feel.
Oh no, you are awesome. Trust me. Like I totally would not have brought you on if I wasn't excited about what it is that you're doing. And so so the first question I do want to ask, though, because there's always something that kind of pulls us in, that gets us interested in different things. And for you, that was ADHD. And so what was it that first kind of piqued your interest about ADHD?
Wow, I could tell the long version of that story, or I could tell the shorter version. Um, so I'm 65 years old, and I've been practicing psychiatry for 15 years. And so, and yet I graduated from medical school 40 years ago, did neurosurgery first, yada, yada. So um, when I was studying for my psychiatry board exam, there was another psychiatrist who was also older in the same training program, who approached me about being study partners. And what he said was, he said he had ADHD, and he took Adderall when he needed it, but he knew that he needed a study partner in order to study enough to be able to pass that written exam. So, the exam was about a year away, and we decided, okay, beginning January, we're going to study together. The exam is in November. Well, when he was talking about this, I'm thinking, yeah, this could apply to me too, that I might not pass that exam if I don't have some structure here. And I had never taken study partners seriously. Turns out that was not good. But we did, and we studied once or twice a week from January to November, and both of us passed the exam. And I'm just amazed. And yet it was during that process that we were studying ADHD that I started thinking, okay, does this maybe apply to me too? And so the more I thought about it, the more I saw it. And in fact, he was going to be specializing in ADHD. And so he interviewed me and did that more formal interview and said, yeah, you're well within the range, so to speak. But I had been seeing a psychiatrist as the patient in primarily psychotherapy. And so that psychiatrist knew me really well. I grew up in an alcoholic family, and so I have issues, and that therapy was not only helpful, but it's what led me out of neurosurgery and into psychiatry, because I enjoyed the emotional work so much more than I enjoyed operating on the brain, which people think, how could you walk away from that? And yet I just really didn't like it as much as I enjoyed this emotional work that we're doing. So the psychiatrist who knew me better said, your brain works too well for me to think that you have ADD. You've had a successful neurosurgery practice. I know you as a psychiatrist, you're, and so I decided to go with that this was probably not ADHD. And yet, as I was interviewing my own psychiatry patients, my practice was getting underway, and I decided, no, the first guy I think was right, that I do have those patterns, and I might have a mild version of ADHD, but I certainly, those patterns are there. And when I think back to medical school, which I started when I was 20 years old, it was painfully difficult.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't have been had I known about ADHD and maybe had been able to use medicine, but I like to say it's much more important to understand it than it is to medicate it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's common. People think, oh, you seem to be functioning fine. There can't be anything wrong with you. But it's just because having it, you've kind of like I tend to make checklists for myself. There's things that you do to overcome it, and people think, oh, you're highly functioning. You can't have anything wrong. It was the same for me with eating disorders. People actually told me, oh, you're successful. Like you can't have an eating disorder.
Okay, so not to detract from your point, but certain words I tend to react to, and when you use the word overcome it, I'm thinking, hold on just a minute.
Yeah.
Is this really something to be overcome, or is it something to understand so you can flow with it and work it to your advantage?
Yeah.
You and I are recording this video probably because we have that creativity to produce videos that we might not have nearly as much if we didn't have some ADD going on.
Yeah. No, that's true. Yeah. And honestly, that's why we connected. Because you didn't see it as something to overcome, you saw it as something that there are strengths in that too. So you may be able to manage the more dysfunctional pieces of it, but use the functional pieces to your advantage. Yeah, absolutely.
That's right. And you won't hear people talking about the upside of ADD very often.
Yeah.
Because the medical profession tends to pathologize it. It's a neurodevelopmental disorder, and medication normalizes it. And of course, there's a whole science that supports that perspective. And I can't and won't say that's bogus. That just wouldn't be a very intelligent thing to say. But there are different perspectives on things. And when you have ADD, you don't want to focus on what's wrong.
Yeah.
You know, what you want to do is to realize that there are easily some strengths and oftentimes to a gifted degree.
Yeah.
You know, there are
Yeah.
people who are very bright and also ADD who then are brilliant when it
Yeah.
comes to hyper focusing and creating and so some of the most famous people throughout history, starting with Albert Einstein,
Yeah.
were were probably ADHD. Now, of course, a lot of those people are historic figures, and they were never interviewed for ADHD because it was never a part
Yeah.
of the
They were
discussion
brilliant.
until the 1970s.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in medical school in the 1970s, and you know it was before the time that people were talking about ADD. So
Yeah.
it's if I could have been a part of that discussion and benefited from
Yeah.
it back then.
Well,
So
I think part of it is that, you know, back in the day, if you were a genius and you were creating, they didn't care if you sat down in a classroom and you behaved. You know, it was about what you were producing because of your genius.
yeah.
Um, so now that we've kind of, you know, thrown out some of these, I'll call them symptoms, but you know, things that will kind of indicate that maybe you have ADHD. Like how would a person know if, hey, I'm just disorganized or I actually have ADHD?
So you know, the new DSM-5 establishes the diagnosis of adult ADHD, and it recognizes that there are people who may not have had it obviously
Yeah.
up until adulthood, and then it starts to come out. Well, it was there all along, and but in someone who's bright and creative, that person has figured out how to do well without attracting attention, and the hyperactivity was never that much of a problem, so behavior didn't attract attention either. So in adult ADHD, what happens is that in our 20s, as we start to pick up more and more responsibility and we have more things going on, um, then the pressure starts to build up, and the ADD comes out. And it comes out from a sense of disorganization,
Yeah.
but also a sense that I can't keep my focus on what I need to keep my focus on.
Yeah.
Now, we have to be careful there because there is also, you know, if somebody comes and says, you know, I'm starting to lose focus here, then I'm going to say, well, what's going on in your life? And what I'm going for there is that people with ADD are overscheduled and overwhelmed. Now,
Yeah.
you don't have to have ADHD in our culture to be overscheduled and overwhelmed. In
Yeah.
fact, we have expectations that we need to produce. You know, you can't sit on the couch for 5 minutes without feeling guilty that you're not getting something done.
That is
All
so
right,
true.
that in and of itself will overwhelm you, and the anxiety from that will result in you not being able to focus as well as you normally might. And so part of what a psychiatrist does is to kind of sort that out. People might think they're ADD or they might be having panic attacks, and it's clear that the front burner problem is panic attacks and anxiety. But
Yeah.
again, we look to if, for instance, a patient who's very anxious, is also very disorganized and easily overwhelmed, then you think, okay, there's some ADD in there too.
Uh-huh.
So that's so I'm just trying to give you a general feel. You asked me, you know, how do people know? Well, you do see that sense of disorganization along with usually trouble focusing.
Yeah.
And then there are these other issues such as, you know, I can't sleep. I mean, my mind is racing at bedtime.
Yeah.
And we'll hear that word racing and think, oh, that's a bipolar manic symptom. And so then they'll they, meaning those that are diagnosing and treating, might go down the wrong path with treatment, thinking that it's bipolar when it's not. The racy ADHD brain is the what I think of as the adult equivalent of hyperactivity.
Yeah.
So it's an internal hyperactivity, and you can kind of learn to slow that down. There are medications that will do that, but again, it's more important to understand what's going on with yourself than it is to medicate it.
Yeah,
You got to
absolutely. Yeah,
the understanding and the insight that says, okay, slow down. I can do that. I
yeah,
can teach myself to do that. I can do some meditation. I can do some yoga. I can pray for peace and calm, and I can get my brain to slow down if I know what the problem is. You see?
yeah. It's
So,
interesting that you bring up meditation because when I first tried meditation, I tried the kind where you just sit and you're supposed to like just let the thoughts flow in and flow out, and I think partially because of my ADHD, I was like, I can't just shut off my brain. My brain just won't do it, and so actually I transitioned to more of a guided meditation because it more so kind of worked with the flow of your brain. It kind of let them flow in and let them flow out. And it was actually, so even with that, I had to kind of adjust to what would work with how my brain functioned, because the just sit in quiet and, it just wasn't working for me. But so I know that our audience is really like interested in this strong correlation between ADHD and eating disorders. And why is there such a strong connection between the two?
um, well, all right. I'll start the answer by saying that I know more about eating disorders than because I'm interested in it because it applies to me. I have a problem of emotional overeating. Uh, and I notice that if I'm under stress, I tend to want to go to the kitchen and I will eat something that I have decided I am not going to eat. It's not healthy for me, but the hardwiring says do it anyway.
Yeah,
And and the hardwiring being really somewhat automatic. And notice there are two different areas of the brain that are uh, debating this, and the automatic hardwiring tends to win out. Okay,
yeah,
so that's the beginnings of the understanding of eating disorder. And so, how does it relate to the ADHD? One of the characteristics of the ADHD brain is that we don't have that methodical way of thinking things through.
uh-huh,
And notice, I mean, we can think things through if we deliberately sit down and do that. For instance, sometimes I'll wake up early and drink my coffee and think, okay, I'm going to let my mind work on this until I get to a better place with it, whatever this is in the moment. But a lot of times, and because our minds are moving faster, and there's a quality of impulsivity in there. If
uh-huh,
impulsivity on the one hand is that impulse to say something or do something without thinking or without thinking it through,
uh-huh.
um, and so blurting something out, sticking your foot in your mouth, or grabbing a bag of Doritos. I did that once. I was it started on a diet, and I'm going down the grocery aisle, and I grabbed some Doritos off the shelf, and then and it was only later that I realized, well, that was an impulsive thing to do. I didn't think
Yeah,
that through. I'm on a diet. I'm not supposed to be eating Doritos.
yeah,
Um, so then there's what I've come to think of as impulsive thinking, whereby if you think in terms of that series of impulsive thoughts going on in your mind, that a lot of that isn't being thought through, and so you don't feel like you're in charge of your brain as much as somebody else might be, and so then we get mixed up,
yeah,
and when we get mixed up, I think that eating disorders is in one sense easily understood as that hardwiring thing that we have to override in order to get control of the eating disorder. So whether we're talking about emotional overeating, excessive eating, which brings to mind the all-you-can-eat restaurant.
Yeah.
You've got bulimia with purging, anorexia with purging, and then this wastebasket term called eating disorders not otherwise specified. All of that, in a sense, is a hardwiring problem in the brain that has to be managed by creating new circuitry in your brain.
Uh-huh.
And so some of that's done cognitively, and some of it is done with nutrition, and some of it is done with exercise. And don't underestimate the value of nutrition and exercise.
Yeah.
That modern science has clearly proven
Yeah.
that you can rewire your brain so that you have more control over ADHD, you have more control over your eating patterns, you have more control. Your brain is working better.
Yeah.
If you're paying attention to what you're eating, you're not putting toxic foods in your body, what we call the standard American diet.
Which is sad.
And you're taking exercise seriously, and that doesn't mean I'm going to the gym and I'm going to take off a few pounds, because that won't be vigorous enough. The exercise we're talking about is that getting your heart rate up, breaking a sweat 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week.
Yeah.
And not, you don't want to get there too soon. You might injure yourself. You might set yourself back. But the point is to take it seriously and move toward that. And then you find that it also helps to, self-education helps a lot there when it comes to understanding what you're doing and motivating yourself to be an expert on the subject being my health and well-being.
So I've heard you say that the ways to kind of calm this impulsive behavior is to get your blood flowing, and that'll help to actually recreate those neural pathways, to eat healthier, which can actually, alter the brain chemistry and to help change those pathways. And then also to work on the thoughts that are going with that, because a lot of times it's so habitual. It's standing in the grocery line, I'm sure a lot of us have grabbed candy bars, these impulse buys, just because it happens to be there. So I guess another piece of that would be your environment. If I don't bring that stuff into my house, there's no impulse to eat it when it's there. So another interesting part about ADHD is the inattentive symptoms of ADHD, and those are highly associated with decreased awareness that you're hungry or decreased awareness that you're full. And they have strongly linked this part of ADHD to eating disorders such as bulimia and binge eating disorders. So how do you tune back into those signals if you have ADHD and it's kind of tuning you out to those signals?
Well, one of the concepts that is really taken off in modern psychology is the concept of mindfulness.
Oh yeah.
Because in mindfulness, what you do is you're mindful of what you're doing and what you're thinking, but in order to be mindful, again, you have to slow down and allow the time for that.
Yeah.
So that's in an ADD discussion, that's kind of where the money is. It isn't so much that you're not focusing on, you can get lost in the details.
Yeah.
What we're talking about here is really about self-control and self-regulation. And in order to do that, you have to slow down.
Yeah.
You slow down your mind, you slow down your activities, you slow down your lifestyle, and you slow down to the point where you have the presence of mind to regulate the things in your life that you want to regulate.
Yeah.
So,
and it's interesting. We often think we don't have the time to slow down, but if we don't slow down, there's consequences to that.
Yes, but that depends upon what your expectations are of yourself.
Yeah.
And what other people are expecting of you. You know, if you're 25 years old and you've got a family that is saying you need to keep pushing, you're in your 20s, this is the time for you to keep getting educated and set up that career path and find that husband and have those children, and those children have to have all their extracurricular activities, and you're expected to do it all. Not so fast.
Yeah.
What the person who wants to go ahead and have a family might want to not to try to push that educational path through right now.
Yeah.
Because what you're going to do is you're going to end up then with a family that's being stressed out by everything that we need to keep up with.
Yeah.
And it's too much. And children don't grow up in a healthy, nurturing environment when their parents are both working and pushing, so they're meeting the expectations of our society, but it's those very expectations that need to be questioned.
Yeah.
Because is all this making me happy? Is all of this going to make me happy at some point in the future? I mean, at what point do we get ahead of all this stress that we're creating for ourselves?
Yeah.
And in a discussion about ADHD and eating disorders, it's like you're not going to control the individual parts of your life if you don't have to slow down and allow for that.
Yeah.
It doesn't
So
just
you're
happen.
basically saying only juggle the number of balls you can actually juggle successfully.
Tim, there was a time in my life, and I'll go back 10 to 12 years, when I realized that I had way too much going on.
Yeah.
You know, I had this system whereby I look at the 6 different major areas of my life: spiritual, physical, financial, family, recreation, and career. This time I knew I had more than 6 things going on. I ended up with 11. And I thought right there,
Yeah.
that tells me I got way too much going on. And not only was I not doing anything well, but I was in the worst health that I have been in my entire life. I had gained weight. I wasn't eating the right foods. I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't getting the right kind of exercise. And I was what doctors call a walking heart attack, meaning somebody that you just know that this guy is so unhealthy that he could drop dead of a heart attack any moment. That's the state that I got into because I was trying to meet all these expectations.
Yeah. And our bodies are so much smarter than we are. Like, if we don't give it time, it just takes its time. It's like, okay, you don't want to slow down, I'm going to make you sick. You know, either way,
Well,
of course
what
you
I
just,
decided to do in that moment, and I say this in order to set an example, I had a mini farm with a herd of alpacas and a barn full of Rocky Mountain horses. I had 3 kids, and then post-divorce, I had my kids more than half the time. And there were just so many expectations. And so I had this revelation in church one day that this is a sinking ship.
yeah.
And so I like to say that I sold everything but the children.
Yeah.
What I did was I got down to something that was manageable:
Yeah.
family, church, work.
Yeah. I
Life
think
was a whole
sometimes our
lot
ego
simpler.
gets involved. We start competing with the people around us, and we go, I got to do more. I got to do faster. And you just got to slow down and go, hey, that's their life. What do I want my life to look like?
You have to be the captain of your own ship.
Yeah.
You have to be the one to design your life the way you want it so that you can be happy.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah.
And that may mean doing less
Yeah.
instead of more.
And
But
it's
it's
interesting that you bring up the mindfulness, because when I went through the mindfulness training, one thing they had us do was to take a raisin. And it was kind of ridiculous at the time, because we literally took a raisin, we looked at every little aspect of it. We were to smell it, and smell every aroma and describe every aroma. We kind of held it up to our ear and we listened to it as we rolled it through our fingers. We felt what it felt like. And it was interesting because once I started to roll that mindfulness into my eating, I realized that there were things that I thought that I really liked and I just had to have. And when I really stopped long enough to actually taste them, I was like, this isn't as good as I thought they were, and I think it was partially just because I was shoveling them down so fast that I didn't have an opportunity to actually taste them. But when I brought that mindfulness into my eating, there were a lot of things that I gave up. And even once and I'll use McDonald's as my example because that was my nemesis.
You need to realize here that you're inspiring me to look at my pistachios with a whole lot more of something.
Yeah. Well, even that, the thing is they tell you that, back in the day, we didn't have pistachios out of the shell. So even if you just leave them in the shell, the effort it takes to unshell them will slow down your eating and it will actually make you more mindful of the number you eat. But yeah, mindfulness is but our lives are moving so fast that sometimes we just don't have time to either enjoy the things we are doing or to realize that, I really don't like this thing,
It's funny. You talk about your raisin and my hardwiring says, okay, that's silly. I don't have time for that. I mean,
yeah, that's exactly how I felt.
Contemplate a raisin. I've got more. My time is too valuable for that. I need to keep. I've got more important things I need to be doing.
Yeah.
And yet the whole point of it is to stop and contemplate the raisin. There's an older term: stop and smell the roses.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Same concept.
Yeah.
Okay, only here we're going to contemplate our raisins.
Yeah. You must have read my mind because that is exactly what I was thinking as I was looking at this raisin. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Can we just learn some stuff? But I missed the point. The point was to just slow down.
Well, we can improve upon that hardwiring by contemplating something other than food.
Yeah.
Notice we've notice that we've come back around to food. So smelling the roses may be better than contemplating food.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, even when you think about it, in people with eating disorders, they waste so much of their life just obsessing over food. And if you were to cut out the time you spend obsessing over food and working out and getting rid of food and making up for the food you did eat and all of this, you would have so much more time to do the things that are really important in life. But yeah.
So that's absolutely true. When people hear that, though, I think it's important to point out that the changes we're talking about, you hear particularly with eating disorders that you need a complete lifestyle change.
Yeah.
And right there in the context of ADHD, that's overwhelming.
Oh yeah.
See?
Yeah.
So again, the point is to start to embrace the concepts, to start to believe in being really healthy and happy. And what will that take? What do I need to learn in order to move in that direction? That's where patience comes in. With ADHD, one of the symptoms is being impatient to get it done. Okay, this is fun. We want to get it done. We want to get it done now.
Yeah.
But then we get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So what you really want to do is I like the idea of becoming an expert on these things. And as you become an expert, what you're doing is you're constantly looking for more knowledge in the area so you can understand yourself better first and then help other people with what you've learned.
Yeah.
And that focus then, it takes the focus off of weight loss, for instance.
Yeah.
My experience with weight loss is you can take it off, but then there's what has to be going on cognitively and emotionally so that you don't put that weight back on.
Yeah. It's like people who get surgeries.
Yeah, here we get back into the eating disorder, or as one person says, disordered eating,
Yeah.
disordered thinking. Okay, so I believe that the way to take weight off and keep it off is to focus on that expertise of being healthier instead.
Yeah. Yeah.
That if you're replacing your obsession with recipes,
Yeah.
to what can I make next? What do I need to do? I need to make food that's not too fattening, and then I need to count my calories. And while all that is legitimate, it won't work
Yeah.
very well. And
Yeah.
if you aren't replacing it with, okay, but I want to eat healthier.
Yeah.
I want to figure out what are these delicious ways to prepare vegetables
Yeah.
instead of delicious ways to roast that meat
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
bake the cake.
Yeah.
That's where I've been just in the last year.
Yeah.
And I'm learning I'm not going to be healthier by focusing on food and by
Yeah.
focusing on what
Yeah.
I'm not going to eat.
Yeah.
Somebody said you're not your success is not determined by what you tell yourself you're not going to do.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
success is determined by who you decide to be and what you are going to do.
Yeah.
And so the encouragement here is become an expert
Yeah.
on your own, excuse me, on your own issues, and be excited about that.
Yeah.
That's happy stuff,
Yeah.
because then you see your life moving in the directions that you really want it to go.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting that you talk about the overwhelm, because when I, was trying to, to move myself through the eating disorder, one of the common things they always have you do is meal planning and food diaries and all of these things. And it was overwhelming to me because, bottom line, I knew what was healthy. I knew what wasn't healthy. I knew what, I wanted to add more of, which was, fruits and vegetables. And I knew what I, needed to minimize. I knew that, it wasn't an education issue. It was the underlying current that I, that compulsive eating and the obsessing over food and all of that really overwhelmed me. But there are some pieces of what I would call the common treatment plan that were overwhelming to me as a person with ADHD, and the meal planning and the food logs, those were two of them. So, but speaking of food, and I know we've been talking about food, but are there certain foods, because I know that we both share this common thought that you can heal your body with food, and that you don't necessarily need to medicate everything. And so my question is, are there certain foods that would trigger ADHD? And on the flip side of that, are there certain foods that would alleviate the symptoms of ADHD?
Well, there is, yes, it's kind of a long-standing concept that for hyperactive children, for instance, you want to eliminate dyes and preservatives from the diet.
Yeah.
And then for those who are wanting to learn more about those things, they learn pretty quickly that it is the refined sugars and carbohydrates that also need to be minimized. And then there are things to take out of your diet, things to put in. So the omega-3 fatty acids you want in. You can get that from eating fatty fish, but I take the fish oil supplement every day, just to be sure I get it. That's kind of the short answer. I would point out that if you're thinking in those terms, then you're already on that path toward what, not just what do I need to do for ADHD, but you're on that wider highway of health. Because whether we're studying brain health or kidney health or heart health, it turns out that it's the same thing, that what's healthy is healthy.
Yeah.
So, if you're getting your fish oil, and you're not putting toxic foods into your body. And you're starting to focus on foods that are truly healthy. It turns out that foods like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, what are called the cruciferous vegetables, that they're like superfoods. They've got protein and nutrients and even toxins that are low enough in degree that they stimulate our immune systems to be stronger.
Yeah.
Which is a real intriguing concept to me, this idea that plants have substances that that provide for survival, so that they're not eaten too easily by animals.
Yeah.
Of course, they're not going to be here. You don't have to have access to medical research studies.
Yeah.
In order to learn this, it's in the books.
Yeah.
Okay. I've got books right here. One on exercise and brain health. This is John Rady's book. Very, very well done. I finished reading this last night. Genius Foods, Max Lucavir's book, also an excellent read. And when you're reading stuff like this, you're starting to get that circuitry going. This is health. This is fun stuff. This is a new expertise, and I love it. I love it because the payoff is that you're happier and healthier. Actually, it's the healthier that leads to the happiness. There's reason now to connect food and mood. There's a food and mood center set up by another author, Felice Jacka. Writes a book called Brain Changer. Yeah, that's this book. Very well done. Very well done. Easy to understand. You don't have to. In fact, Max Lucavir is not a scientist. He's not. Not a doctor. His mother got Alzheimer's disease, and he was highly motivated to understand what was going on with her and became quite the expert on brain health. Brilliant work.
Yeah.
I've got a book down here called Stopping Kidney Disease, written by Lee Hull. Lee Hull is not a scientist. He's not a physician, but he had his own personal reasons to become a leading expert on kidney health. Okay. Now let me ask you, when have you ever heard the term kidney health? Much less thinking, how do I keep my kidneys healthy?
Yeah.
Okay. But you better, or that could be the first thing that fails.
Yeah. Yeah.
So not to be overwhelming, but I think there's a science about being healthy that is out there in what I call the lay literature.
Yeah. And
that's where I learn a lot of what I know about what you're calling holistic medicine. I'm trying to inspire people, just to be transparent here, what you do to improve yourself is that you go find out more information. You develop more understanding, more insight, more self-awareness. And that becomes your focus instead of focusing on the stuff that's not working well for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because a lot of weight loss supplements contain caffeine or caffeine derivatives or other stimulants that act like caffeine. And so when you're talking about an ADHD patient, would you avoid the caffeine and other stimulants, or?
Well, no, caffeine. Okay, caffeine is unhealthy if you're drinking so much of it that you're driving your blood pressure up, or you're driving your anxiety up, and you're wound up too tight, and coffee is what keeps you doing that. Then coffee is kind of complicit in that way of living. But it turns out, on the other hand, that moderate amounts of coffee are actually healthy. There are a number. They're healthy for the kidneys, healthy for the brain. And so let's define stimulant. Well, coffee is a stimulant for people with ADHD. A couple of cups of coffee in the morning kind of gets you started. It brings that focus in,
Yeah.
and so sometimes, and we may get to this at some point. Binge eating disorders is treated with
Yeah.
Vyvanse, which
Yeah.
is an ADHD medication,
Yeah.
and Vyvanse has a certain time frame to it throughout the day. And a lot of people with binge eating will binge late in the day. So you want the medicine to be late enough in the day that it's going to kind of cover that period of time and reduce the frequency of the binging. Well, that means that you may have to take it not at 8 o'clock in the morning, but at 10 or 11 or even 12. If you push it too far, then you might not sleep well. So you kind of try to figure out what your zone is. But the point I'm getting at is you can have a couple of cups of coffee in the morning and take your Vyvanse later.
Yeah.
As a
Okay.
way
Yeah.
if we're talking about, you see a lot of people, absolutely fascinating to think that a lot of people with binge eating disorder are also ADHD or turning it around.
Yeah.
How is it that an ADHD medication that's been used for decades treats binge eating disorder? What's the connection there?
Mhm.
Well, binge eating is kind of an automatic, impulsive thing,
Mhm.
and it's like I'm binging. This is not impulsive because I know what I'm doing, but on the other hand, it is.
Yeah.
It gets back to the impulsive thinking that I was talking about earlier. So there's something about the Vyvanse, the way the Vyvanse works then, whereby it improves focus in ADHD, and it also improves the impulsivity of the ADHD, which then also treats the impulsivity of the eating disorder.
Yeah. I
Very,
thought
very
that was interesting because
connection.
when I think of a hyperactive child, giving them a stimulant, in my layman's term, I was like, giving them a stimulant sounds like a bad idea.
Well,
But yeah.
then, yes, that is a very common
Yeah.
misconception. Okay, because what the stimulants do is they calm down the ADHD brain, the brain that is very scattered and disorganized. When people now are thinking in more ordered ways, they
Mhm.
feel less anxious
Yeah.
because they're less hyperactive, they're less impulsive, they're less. It takes less anxiety to keep it all together.
Yeah.
And so they do say that they are calmer
Yeah.
on the medicine. So then once you know that, it becomes a rather unfortunate thing that we call them stimulants
Yeah.
because of that suggestion that we're going to take a kid who's all over the place and we're going to
Yeah.
stimulate more of that. No, that's just a matter of being uninformed. That's
Yeah.
not what happens.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and basically what it does is it kind of just like you said, it just focuses them instead of being all over the place like I was. You're now more even keeled. Yeah, it's interesting, and it's interesting that a drug for ADHD was the first FDA approved drug to treat binge eating disorders. And so,
Yes.
that tells you how often they occur together and how they kind of rely on the same neural networks. It's interesting. Yeah.
It
Well,
is very
and
interesting.
another, yeah, it's fascinating. But I know another component that both eating disorders and ADHD share is that emotional dysregulation. And with people with eating disorders, a lot of times they will use food to emotionally regulate themselves. So are there any tips for a person, who is using food to emotionally regulate, like a healthier way to emotionally regulate?
So I don't know that we're talking so much about ADHD patterns in that to answer that question. I think um, what comes to mind is that um, we're just now learning the effect that food has on mood.
Yeah.
And so it has a lot to do with blood sugar levels going up and coming down, insulin that's having to go up and come down. And we're learning the effect that that actually has on the brain.
Yeah.
So, for instance, and this is just a small piece of the discussion, but one of the things that is being discussed now and proven scientifically is that this emphasis on whole grains is not right, because by even eating a lot of whole grains instead of the simple carbohydrates, you're still putting a lot of carbohydrate in your system.
Yeah.
And it's too much. It's not what our bodies were designed to do. And what happens is that then insulin has to stay up for long periods of time in order to manage the glucose that is being generated by all those carbohydrates. And insulin has regulatory. Insulin's a hormone. It doesn't just lower your blood sugar.
Yeah.
The simple way of thinking about insulin and blood sugar is that insulin is what keeps your blood sugar from going too high. But insulin does much, much more than that,
Oh, yeah.
including the influence it has on the brain. And it's beyond the scope of this discussion to talk about that in details, but it is important to realize that if you're not eating that healthy diet, which is mostly vegetables.
Yeah.
Fruit has been cultivated now to pack in the calories because it's mostly sugar. Apples, oranges, bananas have just as much sugar and just as much impact as candy does. So again, it's very important to become an expert on the subject in the sense that you have to learn these basics. And so your question about emotional dysregulation, well, you will regulate your emotions quite a bit better if you're a student of what's really healthy here and what exercise do I need to do, that I need to do. It's not an option if you want to be healthy.
Yeah.
And so people come to the doctor. People don't know. They don't know, and because they don't know, they come to doctors for answers. But there's also this expectation that if a medication can fix it, that'd be great.
Yeah.
But then that becomes the quick fix way of thinking about it. So we will go ahead and use some medicines if things need to be treated sooner rather than later. But it's also best to say that the medication is a small piece of the solution here.
Yeah.
The real solution is this lifestyle change.
Yeah.
We're making ourselves sick because we don't know how to make ourselves healthy.
Yeah. But it does sound like, and I won't call it a quick fix because it's more of a lifestyle, but I mean, just moving your body, getting your blood flowing, staying away from the processed foods and eating more vegetables, and minimizing your meat, because meat does cause a lot of inflammation in your body and that sort of thing. Those things are pretty easy fixes, and it's not even a matter of subtracting anything from your life or restricting things in your life. It's just a matter of adding. Let's add some movement in my day. Let's add some more vegetables to my day.
Yes. So you and I are doing this recording very early in the morning for me. It's like it's 8 o'clock here now. It's getting light outside, and my choice as we after we finish here is to either go to the kitchen, pour another cup of coffee, and have a banana, or get up and go outside and walk around the block a couple of times at a fairly brisk pace.
Yeah.
Because it's one or the other. if you teach yourself, no, I'm going to go for a walk
Yeah.
instead of going and getting a snack, then that's I call that substitution.
Yeah.
And there's something about that word substitution which is still somewhat inadequate, but it makes the point that we do need to rewire or change
Yeah.
the way we think about these things, particularly food. I mean, if our listeners are listening because they have an eating disorder or disordered eating, substitution is a very real concept, that you
Yeah.
do something that is healthier than going back to the food because you're
Yeah.
hardwired to go back to the food.
Yeah. Like, I'm having a bad day. Let me meditate instead of eat. Let me do yoga instead of eat. Let me take a walk around the block instead of eat. Yeah. And the thing is, those create all of those healthy, like feel good, chemicals in our body. So
Yeah.
it could actually give us the same effect that food does, because it activates that reward system in your brain. Is if we just look at it different. Oh, yay, I get to go outside, I get to go for a walk, be out in nature, I get to take 10 minutes to myself where it's just quiet, and I just meditate or do some yoga. And it doesn't have to be anything extreme. You start wherever you're at.
All that is absolutely true. And what I would add to it is that if you learn how your brain actually changes
Yeah.
after going out and walking for a mile,
Yeah.
then you see that your deliberate attitude toward it is kind of almost, the attitude is important, but the brain chemistry will change in such
Yeah.
a way that now you're happier.
Yeah.
The runner's high is an extreme example, but it takes a much lower level of exercise will stimulate the same endorphins, and then there are actually other receptors in the brain called endocannabinoids that are relaxing uh, neurotransmitters, we'll say. So your brain stimulates that relaxation.
Yeah.
And so then, you go out for a walk and you come back and you're satisfied, you're calmer, you're happier, and than you were before you went out for a walk.
Yeah.
And it didn't require an attitude adjustment in order to be able to do that. It does require a certain knowledge that yes, it does work that way.
Yeah.
And therefore I can expect that. So
Yeah.
if I'm feeling bad, I need to go for a walk.
Yeah.
Because I know what it does for my brain chemistry.
Yep.
Because I will come back happier 10 minutes from now, which is what I want. Or I could go to the kitchen and fix myself a peanut butter sandwich, because that's what I always do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's habit. Yeah. 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 Eating is such a complex beast, because there's so many reasons why we eat. Yeah. But I know that we're coming to the end of our hour, and we could talk all day about ADHD and eating disorders and all of the other things that we find interesting. But are there any parting tips that you would give a person who has ADHD, who also has an eating disorder? And I do want to kind of point out that when you look at ADHD and eating disorders, especially where the impulsivity is involved, when you're talking bulimia and binge eating disorders, impulsivity is higher, and therefore it is more aligned with binge eating disorders and bulimia. Whereas in anorexia, usually impulsivity is lower, which is why they restrict their food. So it's typically not as common, unless you're talking about an anorexic with a binge subtype, but it's not as common. So we are more linking this to the binge eating disorders and the bulimia. But when you're talking about ADHD and bulimia and binge eating disorders, are there any parting tips that you would give a person who's trying to get both of those, to their advantage and to be more functional, that you would give a person?
The standard answer to a question like that might be that you need to become more informed about how this works. And while that is true, I think it goes beyond that. And I'm going to give you an answer you might not expect. People are more or less conditioned. They've been conditioned all their lives that when they want to understand something that's medical or scientific, they go to the doctor and they hope the doctor is going to explain it to them and tell them what they need to know. Well, doctors don't take the time to do that. And one of the reasons that we don't is because we've been conditioned by people who ask the question and then they don't change anything because they really don't want to change. Okay. So the point of it all is if you go to a doctor and say, here's my problem, or here are the symptoms, you tell me what my problem is. And then in the sense of, doctor's orders, you tell me what to do and I'll do it. And what that is I call that a passive approach to your own health care.
Yeah.
That what you're doing is submitting yourself to the medical profession, thinking that, there's no way you can know enough to do this yourself. And in some ways that might be true.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about things like eating disorders and emotional problems and how to be happier, a very active approach needs to be taken. It's like, I'm going to take control of my life.
Yeah.
I'm the captain of my ship. I'm the only one who's going to make this happen. I can't depend on somebody else to do it for me. That's the best advice that I could give. Is I have people who do their own research and then come in and talk, and I'm thinking, and then they apologize for going on Google and learning some things. They think I'm going to have a problem with that. And I'm thinking, no. The information is there. Why wouldn't an intelligent person go educate herself on what her problem is, and then come ask me questions? And then now we have a conversation going at a higher level.
Yeah.
One where I really can help someone who is clearly motivated.
Yeah.
Then it even stimulates me to go learn some more and then come back and be more helpful. You see, that process works a whole lot better than passive approach.
Well, and you know you better than anybody. So
coming back to this idea of become the expert. Learn about yourself. Learn and make it a joy. You get home from work and sit down and read your book. Your book is the stuff that you're learning so that you can understand yourself better and you can be happier. And you see that as the self-awareness starts to build, then you develop that sense of, I know enough that I've got some control over this now. And that feels really good.
Yeah, because it's empowering.
Yes.
You're no longer a patient, you're no longer a victim, you're no longer broken, you're empowered and you're taking charge and you're learning and you're in control of your life and your path. And that's outstanding. But and the thing is, to your point, like most doctors, even therapists, they're generalists. So if you've done your homework and you know what's going on with you, chances are that you may actually know more about the specific thing you've researched, for the past, however long you've had this issue than they do. And when I had an eating disorder, I don't know how many therapists said, I haven't diagnosed you with an eating disorder. Oh, eating isn't going to kill you. Oh, you're healthy. I don't know what you're worried about. Oh, just let me show you a diet. Things that were largely unhelpful. So, really educating yourself and going, what works for me? What's going to make me healthy and happy? And that is. And to our relationship, like this is why Terry and I get along so well, because not only is Terry all about empowerment and self-education, but he doesn't see these potential differences as you being broken. He sees it as a way for you to go, okay, let me understand it. Let me see how I, can work it into my life, how I can use the benefits of it, because like we were talking, people with ADHD often are more creative. Their brain does operate at a higher speed. You've often taken 20 steps before your friends have taken one, so there are advantages of these things, but you just have to learn the things that aren't as advantageous, and and learn how to make those functional in your life. And like I said, we can talk all day, but Terry does have, and I know that it's not loaded yet, but he's going to be on that. He has a wonderful course on ADHD and understanding the ins and the outs of it, and how you can work with the ADHD to make your life more functional, and make your life more productive, and make your life more fulfilling and happy. So if you are interested in finding out more about Terry's course, you can go to his website, or at least you will, because I know today it says coming soon. So we're all looking forward to that. To Terry Hagan, and that's TerryHaganMD.com. And then you can check out this course. You can learn all about ADHD and how it's potentially playing into your life, and how it's potentially playing into your eating disorder. And then you can work with that. There are a lot of things that you can do for yourself. And it is about educating yourself and empowering yourself to take control over your destiny. So that's very exciting. And so Terry, before we go, I just want, is there anything else you'd like to say to the audience before we end the wonderful talk that we've had today?
Well, yeah, well, I thank you again. Just a word about the course that I've put together. I again have been practicing psychiatry for 15 years, and a lot of things that I discuss with patients, I discuss over and over again. And so I've done this video series as a way of just putting all that on the record, so to speak. I did the video for my patients, so that if I have a new patient with ADHD, it's like, go watch my video. It's free for my patients. And the whole point, again, is to understand ADHD first. And so if you kind of wrap your mind around there's this content in the video that talks about organization, and talks about relationships, talks about academic success, and even anger management, for the purpose of just getting your mind wrapped around what is ADD and what is it not, and how do I think about it. It's a different kind of brain. It learns differently, and when you learn the patterns, then you can again use that to your advantage.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say I've done this for my patients. It's not a scientific work. It's on the level of just trying to be helpful.
Yeah, education, not treatment.
Right.
Yeah. Even though you are a doctor and you know lots.
I've learned a few things.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Terry, and thank you for educating our audience. And I will talk to you later. And for my audience, if you'd like to hear more of these, go down below and hit subscribe. And when we post the next video, it will notify you that the next video is posted, and you can learn more about yourself, and you can learn more about how to make your life more productive. And if you know anyone who you think might struggle with eating disorders, feel free to send them the link, share the videos with them, bring them into the conversation, because this isn't just a conversation between Harry and I or me and you. This is a conversation that the more we talk about it, the more normalized it becomes, and the more people go, there's no shame in having ADHD. There's no shame in having an eating disorder. We just have to figure out how to make it more functional in your life, and how to make it more functional in the environment around you, with your loved ones and all of that. So again, if you would like to subscribe, share it with others, feel free. And until next time, go out there and love and live and connect. All right, I'll talk to you next time.